Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video we're gonna go over Addtoend method. Okay, so here I have a list, an integer list class in Java, and here I have an inner class of node which contains two elements, of course the data and the next field. And if you're confused about this code, I've already explained this code in my previous video in part 2 of this playlist. So if you want to check out the playlist, I have provided the link in the description below and also the link to the part 2 of this video. So please go ahead and watch this before so you can better understand. Okay, so in the part 2, we basically did all this code, like wrote this integer class and this node class, the inner node class. So let me quickly explain this. So here we have two fields, the data and the next field, because a node contains two fields, data and next field. And then we have a default constructor which simply sets the data to 0 and the next field to null. So if you're using the default constructor to make a node, but if you're using a parameterized constructor to make a node, we're passing in data and a next field, and this is simply setting the data and the next field using the constructor. And then this is it for the inner node class, and then we comes here to the integer list class, and then here we have a node, and then here we have our default constructor which is simply setting the head field to null. And I also wrote this add2front method in the second part, so you can check that out. So in this video we are simply going to add the Addtoend method. Okay, so now first of all, what do? We write public void add to end, and then what does it expect? It is going to accept an integer data. Since we are creating an integer list, so it is going to accept an integer as a parameter, the Addtoend method. And then for this, like how we're going to code this, so let me explain to you in the notes so that it's better for you to visualize how does it work. Okay, so here we are in the notes. So here this is the Addtoend method. So here we have, for example, our linked list like this, right? So the head is always pointing to the start of the list, and the next field of the last one is points to the null. So this is how a linked list looks like, and we want our new node. So we are creating a new node first of all. So here this is a data and the next field, because a node contains data and the next field. So this is our new node. Okay, and we want it to be the end of the list. So how can we do this? So you know that the next field always points to the null of the last node, right? So the last node in the list, the next field of the last node always points to null. Okay, so using this you can make this the last node. How? So what about if you make the next field of this one point to null? So then now this becomes our end of the list. But what about the connection between these two? We don't have any connection between this and the new node. So for this, let's connect the next field of this to the new node that we just created. Okay, so we have pointed the next node, the next field of this node to the new node that we just created, and this is how we inserted a node to the end of the list. And this completes our list. So our list now looks like this. So it has like a data and the next field, and then just like that, data, next field, and then data, next field. And now we also have our new node at the end. Here, this new node is now attached to it, and this is of course pointing to the head, the start of the list. Okay, so if you didn't get it, so let me explain again. Okay, so first of all, what is the first step? So first step is to create a new node. Okay, so this is our list, for example, a linked list, and we are creating a new node first of all. Okay, and we want it to be the end of the list. This node to be the end of the list, and to be the end of the list, we know that the next field should point to the null. So we are going to remove this, and we are going to point the next field of this new node to null. So now this becomes the end of the list, and then we are going to combine this list, this new node with the list, so that it becomes the part of this list. How we are going to point the next field of the old node. So the next field that was pointing to null now points to the new node that we just created. So this is how we are going to do this. So now let's try to code this. If you still didn't get it, then let me know in the comments and I will try to explain you. Alright, so here we are. Okay, so first we have to check a condition as well. Okay, so like before we code what I just explained about the nodes and stuff, we have to first check a condition. What if the start of the list is null? Okay, because we want the new node to be the end of the list, right? But what if it's not the end of the list? I mean, what if the list is empty? Then in this case, you have to write an if condition to write that if the head, so let's do this, if the head is null, then we are going to point the head to the new node that we just created, because the head always points to the first node in the list, right? So if the head is null, if the list is empty, right? If there's no node in the list, so then we're going to create a new node, and then we're going to point the head to it, and then we are going to return from here. And yeah, this is important that if you do this, you are calling the new node's default constructor, right? And the default constructor. So the default constructor, it doesn't expect any parameters. So this is simply going to set the data to null in the next field, the data to 0 in the next field to null. But we want our new node, the data to be the data that gets passed in to the method. So we are going to pass in the data and then the next field. So what do we want our next field to be? So we want our next field to point to null, right? Because when we are creating a list, so every time the list end node next field points to null, right? So that's why the next field here is going to point to null. Okay, so don't worry if you didn't get it, because I'm going to explain it afterwards in details. So don't worry if you still don't get it. Okay, so let's continue with this. So now when we have checked our condition that the list is empty or not, but so we are done with this condition. So now comes the method if the list is not empty. Okay, so this is the method that I just explained. So we are adding at the end of the list if the list is not empty. So for that, we have to create a temporary node. Okay, so you can call it temp. Oops, where am I writing? Okay, so you can call it temp, and this is going to point to the head. Okay, oops, that was small letter. Okay, and if you're confused about why are we making a temporary variable and pointing it to head, then let's go back to the notes. Okay, so why are we creating a temporary variable? Okay, so let's answer to this question. So here, like I said, we are pointing the last node's next field to the new node that we just created. But how do we know that this is the last node in the list? Okay, we know that it's going to point to null, right? But we need to be able to get to this list. How do we get to this list? How do we get to this node so that we can assign its next field to the new node. So for this, we have to make a temporary node. Okay, so for this, we have to make a temporary node. Let's call it temp. So then it's going to traverse the whole list. So it's going to traverse the list and then find the node whose next field is going to point to null. So when it's going to find a node whose next field is pointing to null, so let's say this one, so let's say 1, 2, 3. So now it finds that it's the third node that is pointing to null. So now what is going to do the temporary node? So this is going to point the next field of the temporary node to the new node that we just created, and then it's going to, and then the new node that we created, the next field points to null. So this is going to end our Addtoend method. Okay, so I hope you got the idea of the temporary node. If you didn't get it, then you can go ahead and play this as many times as you want, but if you want, I can quickly explain it once again. So we are starting the temporary node, so we are first pointing it to the head. Because we are starting from the head, we are starting to traverse the list from the start. So now we are pointing it towards the head, so it is starting from the head. So and the head is pointing to the first node, so we are here right now. So then it starts from the front and then it's going to move on, okay, to the next node and then to the next node. And once it finds the node that's next field is pointing to null, so then it's going to point the next field to the new node that we just created. Okay, so let's write everything in Eclipse what I just explained. Okay, so we created a temporary node and assigned it to head. And to traverse the list until we reach the null, we are going to use a while loop. So it's going to traverse the list until we find the next field null. So for that, we need to do t.next, right? Because we want the next field to be null. So until it's going to traverse the list until it doesn't find null. So until it's not equals to null, because the while loop, you know, it continues until the condition is true. So it's going to traverse the list until the list is null. Okay, so as soon as the list is null, then the loop stops. Okay, and I did temp, sorry. Okay, so now within the loop, so this is going to loop it until you find the next field of the temporary node to be null. And to continue the loop, we have to set the node equals to temp.next. Okay, if you don't understand this, so you know, first of all, the temporary node is pointing to head, okay? So, and then we want the temporary variable to point to the next field. We want it to traverse the nodes, right? Traverse the list. So the temporary node is currently pointing to the head. So then in the next iteration, we want it to point to the next one, the temp.next, and temp.next is pointing to the next node, okay? So then we are setting the node, our temporary node to the next node within the list, okay? So I hope that it was clear. If it's not clear, then don't worry. I will explain it afterwards in the notes. Okay, so after we are done with this, so this ends our while loop. So let's move over here. And then what's our next step? We are creating a new node. Okay, node n equals, node n equals new node creating a new node and passing in the data that we want to this data, and then it's going to accept a next field. And what do we want our next field to be? Yeah, we want it to be null because it's the end of the list, and the next field always point to the null at the end of the list. So this is how we create a new node. We got our new nodes now. So this loop is going to finish when we have found the node that whose next fields point to null. Okay, so temp.next points to null, right? So we have our temp.next, so we can point the next field of this to the new node that we just created. So this is going to remove the connection that from the previous one. So previously temp.next was pointing to null, right? So now it is going to point to our new node that we just created, and the new node's next field is pointing to null, and this is going to add a node to the end of the list. And this completes our Addtoend method. And just to avoid privacy leak, you can do this n equals to null. Okay, and if you want your code to be a little shorter, then you can skip these 3 lines and write this instead. Okay, so let me comment all these lines. Okay, so you can write this as well. So you are pointing your temp.next, the temporary node next field, to the new node that you just created, and the new node you're passing in the data, and the next field to null. So you can replace these 3 lines with this code. So this is going to complete your Addtoend method, and this is it. This is it if you understood so far. So that's good. If you didn't understand, then let me explain everything within the notes. Alright, so here we are. So this is the code that we wrote. Okay, and we are passing in the data. So we are passing in the new node that we want to add to the data. Okay, so first of all, we have to check if the head is null or not. So we are checking if the list is empty or not. So if the list is empty, so the head is going to point to null. Okay, there is no nodes in the list. That means the list is empty. Okay, so for that we are going to check if head equals to null. So if head is equals to null, then we are going to create a new node, and we are going to create a new node if the head is empty. So we're going to create a new node. So for example, this is the new node, and we are pointing the head to the new node. So we are pointing the head to the new node, and the new node's next field to null. New node's next field to null. Because the constructor, the parameterized constructor, expect 2 parameters, right, within this. So it's going to accept the data and the next field. So every time we create a new node, we have to pass in the data that we want and the next field. So the next field we're passing in null. So this is how it's going to look like if you add if the list is empty. Okay, so now moving back to here, so we have checked our condition now if the node is empty or not. So now and then it's going to return from here. It's not going to go ahead and do this. And if the list is not empty, so this condition is false, so then it's going to come over here. And then here what it's going to do, first of all, creating a temporary node. Okay, so it creates a temporary node. So let's say this is the temporary node. So then first of all, it's pointing to the head. So the head is pointing to this one, to this node, right? So then this node, so this is basically temporary variable. Temporary node is pointing to this one currently. And then you're going to check if temp.next, so the next field, its next field is null or not. So this is false, right? So is not equals to null. It's not equals to null. So sorry, so that's going to be true because it's not null, right? So this is true, and the while loop is going to continue until you have false in here, right? So it's going, if this is true, so then it's going to come in here and we say temp equals temp dot next. So then it's going to check for the temp dot next. So then temp is over here, right? And temp dot next, what is temp dot next is pointing to? Temp dot next is pointing to a new node that is in front of it. Okay, so that this node. So then temp dot next, which is this node, so 1, 2, 3, which is the second node. Now second node points to temp, so temp becomes temp dot next. So before temp was this, now temp is temp dot next, which is this one. Okay, and then it's going to continue over here because it's a loop, and then go back again and then check temp dot next is not equals to null. Is it null? No, it's not null. So then it's true, the condition is true that it's not null because it's not equals to null. Okay, so this is not null, the next field of this is not null, it's pointing to a new node. So then it's going to do this again. So then temp dot next, which is the next node, so then the next node is this one. So then temp equals to temp dot next, so then temp becomes this node. Okay, and afterward what is going to do, and then loop again. So then here it's going to check if temp dot next is null or not. So previously we had like this is the linked list we had. Okay, so it was pointing to null. So now it's check if the next node is null. So now the next node is null. Okay, it's not equals to null. So is it not equals to null? No, that's false. It is equals to null. So this is false. And now what is our temp now? So now our temp is pointing to this node, the last node. So we got to our last node like this. So now we are at our last node. Okay, so now we are finally at our last node. So we can point this last node. Okay, so we can point this last node to the new node that we just created. So we're creating a new node and passing in the data. And the next field, what are we passing the next field to? We are passing the next field to null because we want it to be the end of the list. So our temp is over here. Our temporary variable is at this node, the last node. So we're pointing its next field to the new node that we just created. So this is what we are doing. We are pointing our temp.next, our next field, to the new node that we just created. Okay, so I hope that was clear. If it's not, please let me know in the comments, and I hope you like this video. Please share it with your friends and please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.